A bit of corporate context and history before I get to the rest of Super Huey. The game was originally released for the Commodore 64 in 1985 by Cosmi Corporation, and it was a groundbreaking hit. The company released most of the subsequent ports of Super Huey except for the 7800 version, which was handled by Atari Corporation. Cosmi itself kept going well into the early 2010s, although it eventually turned into a large publisher of budget games and cheap productivity software. According to an entry from Moby Games, Ziggurat Interactive acquired Cosmi's catalog in 2019. Ziggurat itself was created around that same time to remaster, rework, and restore old console and PC games, with Super Huey being one of the games touted in the company's initial 2020 press release. The person who has been in charge of Atari since April of 2021, Wade Rosen, is the founder and CEO of Ziggurat Games. It can't be said Super Huey is a particularly exciting game in 2022, even at its most action-packed, although it's decent enough to go back to when looking at retro games history or if you actually played it back in the day. Time spent with the game opens the gameplay up considerably, but the game's approachability will depend a lot on personal taste. What differentiates Super Huey from other aerial shooters of its time is the inclusion of both a simple blow-things-up arcade mode and a pretty deep simulation mode spread across two game types. A flight school that teaches you to fly, essentially how to use the controls but without guidance on what to actually press, and a reality mode which takes your training and combines it with combat, a base to blow up, resources to keep track of, and the chance to get back and land if you can, to refuel. Super Huey is a game that rewards an initial hour or so of patience, and a willingness to spend time with it before it gets fun. You have to learn how to fly using the 2-button and joystick control scheme of the 7800, and that is the hardest part of the game. You can ignore the deeper gameplay and stick to arcade mode without any practice, and I bet a lot of kids of the era did just that. There's not a lot of variety on display in arcade mode though, and the combat stays pretty basic until it's game over, at which point the next game plays largely the same. Reality mode is a lot to think about, and if you don't have the manual, it's difficult to impossible to figure out. Doing so though is ultimately what gets you to the part of Super Huey that made the game a success back in the day. Given the game's design for the simple 2-button 7800 joystick, Super Huey is overall pretty successful in bringing a more sim-style game to the console, perhaps for a more mature audience of the era. I can imagine 7800 owners at the time who were seeing people play flight games on their personal computers appreciated having a game like this. Experiencing it for the first time in 2022 makes it hard to judge. We're used to games that offer immediate gratification, and the idea of having to reference a manual while learning to just get your helicopter off the ground may put off some gamers. This is a game that asks you to read the manual, learn it, and then get better at having fun with the game. Of course, all that relies on reading the manual, which, like other games in the Flashback Friday series, is not included. Check out Atari Age or a similar site to get it, but here's a short class from Mockduck's Retro Flight School to hopefully help you out. A executes whatever is displayed in the box, but brighter text is not selectable, and is instead the game telling you what needs to be done. To do it, back out using the B button, use left and right to navigate the menu, then press A to execute a command. B again backs out to what is essentially a blank command screen, where you can then, and only then, execute flight operations like raise and lower your pitch, or increase and decrease your engine speed. Hold A and press up or down to raise and lower pitch, which is essentially your altitude, A and left or right to adjust engine speed or rotor speed depending on what you picked. Look up how to land in the manual, but it's essentially the reverse, and good luck. And don't be surprised if you find yourself accidentally shutting off your engine mid-battle. When in reality mode, you need to first arm a missile, then fire it with the A button. Unlike the arcade mode where A is machine gun and B is missile, A is how you fire whatever you have selected from the menu. Once you have selected it and backed out of the menu, the targeting reticule will display. If it is red when you press A, you are locked on. The game supports both the classic and modern controllers without issue. One last note, there have been several sequels, with the last one I could find being Super Huey 3 in 2003. Ziggurat does own them, so perhaps we'll see this game's sequels on the VCS in the future. Until then, they are available on GOG and similar places. Surprisingly, Super Huey is not currently available to play in Antstream Arcade. Thanks for watching. I'm working in the coming weeks to make videos on Real Sports Baseball 7800, a teardown of the classic controller, and any other games released. Liking lets others know about the channel, subscribing makes it so you don't forget about these videos, and it puts them in your feed. Have fun!